Today, a New York judge has ruled to delay President-elect Trump's sentencing in his hush money criminal case. Judge Juan Merchan made the announcement in a letter stopping the case from proceeding to allow time for additional written briefings from President Trump's legal team. The president-elect's attorneys are fighting to get all 34 felony conviction counts tossed out before his return to the White House. Merchan has ordered Trump's legal team to file their motion for dismissal by December 2nd. Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg, who oversaw the prosecution, has opposed the effort, instead suggesting to the judge that proceedings in the case should be frozen while Trump serves as president and revisit sentencing once Trump leaves office. His team will have until December 9th to respond to the motion for dismissal. If the judge agrees with Bragg, that would mean Trump would enter into the White House as the first convicted felon ever to hold the presidency. And just hours after former Congressman Matt Gaetz announced he is withdrawing as Attorney General nominee, President-elect Trump announced his replacement pick, former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi. Bondi is a close ally of Trump who is floated in his inner circle, working for the president-elect's legal team during his first impeachment. And for the former congressman, many are watching what his next steps will be. Today, Gaetz announced he will not be coming back to Congress, but there are other options for Gaetz to stay in Washington or obviously in Florida. Joining me now is national political reporter Cate Martel with more insight on Pam Bondi and what's next for Matt Gaetz. Cate, it's great to see you. So, Pam Bondi is another Florida pick for the president-elect. What more can you tell us about her?
Well, Julia, Pam Bondi was not a particularly surprising pick for President-elect Trump. Shortly after Matt Gaetz withdrew his nomination, we had already started hearing rumors and murmurs that Pam Bondi was going to be up and next as the AG pick. She is a longtime Trump loyalist. Like you mentioned, she's the former Attorney General of Florida and has a lot of experience within this regard. She's also known very much as a Trump loyalist. She is actually the chair of a right-wing think tank that is heavily involved with the Trump transition and coming up with their priorities within the administration. She does come with some controversy, though. She was somebody who backed Trump's false claims of a stolen election and massive voter fraud that was later unproven. So she does come with a bit of controversy, but she should likely pass through Congress a little bit easier than Matt Gaetz would. And I think the Trump administration is hoping that that is the drama that has already passed as far as the AG pick.
Yeah, and she's already getting praise from a number of Republican senators, which was a major roadblock for Gaetz. So obviously a different mood for Bondi within the Republican conference in the Senate. So I want to turn back to Gaetz. His short-lived status as Attorney General nominee does not mean an end for politics for the former congressman. What does his future look like? I mean, he has a number of different avenues. He could serve in the Trump administration if Trump appoints him to a position without that it doesn't need a confirmation hearing, or he could stay in Florida. What do you see him doing down the road?
It's a good question, Julia, because his name recognition is so high, despite being fairly disliked in Congress by both Republicans and Democrats. There wasn't a lingering question of whether he would go back to Congress because, yes, he did resign, but he resigned from the 118th Congress, not the 119th Congress that will come into office in January. But he actually said today that he is not going back to Congress. There are murmurs that he could potentially run for governor in 2026 in Florida. And there were also, some speculation. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis does have to replace Senator Marco Rubio in the Senate. That would be an appointment for 2 years. So that is also something that has been floated. But I think the most likely scenario for Congressman Gaetz is that he'll probably be a media personality and maybe stay in the private sector. He has a lot of experience with media exposure and being a defender of President-elect Trump. So no matter what he does, I expect to see him on the media circuit. But I think that's a very likely path for him, is to stay within the media sector and build on his media career.
Yeah, and we know that President Trump likes to see his allies all over the cable news circuit and, recently the podcast circuit. So we'll be watching to see what the former congressman does. So his withdrawal came one day after he met with senators on Capitol Hill. We know that he was under so much scrutiny, but are we seeing some of that scrutiny sort of be passed on to his Trump's other nominees, like, say, Pete Hegseth?
Yep, I think Pete Hegseth is the perfect example here. That now the attention is off of Matt Gaetz and onto some of the more controversial picks the president-elect Trump has had so far. There was a new police report showing details from an alleged 2017 incident involving Pete Hegseth, allegations that he denies adamantly. And we're starting to see people on Capitol Hill react to that. So he is certainly a more controversial pick. I also say it would put RFK Jr., Trump's pick for HHS secretary, in that same category, as well as Tulsi Gabbard, who would be picked to lead the Office of National Intelligence, a really important position. And she doesn't have a ton foreign policy experience. And on Capitol Hill for the past week, all I had been hearing about is Matt Gaetz. And now that Matt Gaetz is no longer part of the picture, I think it will put a lot more attention and scrutiny on some of these other picks.
Yeah, and I want to zero in on Robert F. Kennedy Jr. We know that he made a sharp turn from being a Democratic presidential candidate to a Trump ally in the course of a year and a half. He's up to lead the Department of Health and Human Services, but we know that Kennedy comes with his own baggage, like his very unorthodox views on vaccines and some modern medicine, but he's also a longstanding abortion rights supporter, which could put him at odds with some Senate Republicans. Do you think this could have any major impact on his chances of passing through the Senate confirmation process?
It's a fascinating question that you're asking, Julia, because abortion rights was something that was very much a part of the conversation in the 2024 campaign. But it's actually looking like that actually will not stop RFK Jr. from potentially being confirmed by the Senate for HHS. Now, some senators do have some concerns when it comes to his longstanding abortion rights. But I think what we're hearing is they'll most likely end up backing him over giving deference for President-elect Trump and having the cabinet and the administration that he would like. We have seen some concerns from some leading anti-abortion activists and leaders over his stances on abortion, namely former Vice President Mike Pence, though he's very much on the outs. But there are some concerns about his abortion stances. I think what's even more important here, though, is that Republicans don't seem to be caring too much about the abortion side of things, but there are some real hesitations and concerns over some of RFK Jr.'s more controversial stances on, say, drinking water, removing fluoride, and vaccines. And I think when we have these Senate confirmation hearings, from what I'm hearing, it sounds like those will be front and center, even more so than abortion rights.
So, on these confirmation hearings, we know that Trump has been putting pressure on Senate Republicans to fall in line and potentially allow recess appointments. And one way his transition team is looking to accomplish that is to use Article 2, Section 3 of the Constitution and essentially force an extended recess. But it kind of seems like Republicans aren't 100% on board with that idea and they're pushing back, correct?
Yeah, it does seem that Republicans are starting to pour cold water on this plan. Basically, President-elect Trump, his goal is to have Senate Republicans go into recess for an extended period of time. Then he would get to appoint the cabinet that he wants without any type of Senate confirmation. The key issue that we're hearing here, though, is constitutional separation of powers. That is very much put into place for the legislative body to be able to look at the executive branch's picks and decide whether they want to confirm them. And we're already starting to see some pushback from Republicans saying that they still want to have that power. So I am starting to expect some more pushback that I'm not sure President-elect Trump is going to get to push through some of his nominees based on this. And we are starting to see some Republicans, stand up to him in a certain way that they do want him to be able to have his picks, and that's why I expect some of the more controversial picks will still ultimately get confirmed. But I think that it's probably not going to be through recess picks.
I want to switch gears to Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy. They will have a new partner when it comes to their Department of Government Efficiency. Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene has been tapped to lead a new Doge panel in the House. This comes after Greene led a failed effort to oust Speaker Mike Johnson. Can we glean anything about about the state of Greene and Johnson's relationship, that she's essentially doing this in the House under Johnson's leadership?
It does tell us a lot because Marjorie Taylor Greene and Speaker Mike Johnson have not been friends. She has been sharply critical over Johnson the past year and has even tried forcing him out of office through the speakership vote. So they do not necessarily have this friendship, but they apparently did meet last week and smooth things over. So this is certainly a sign of a truce that she is now going to be leading a subcommittee that does not exist now, will be ratified come the 119th Congress. And it's remarkable when you start comparing, in 2021, she was stripped of all of her committee assignments, and just a few short years later, now she is going to be given control over a subcommittee that will be heavily involved with the Trump administration.
Life comes at you fast. That's what they say. Cate Martel, as always, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Julia.
2 Georgia election workers who were awarded with a $146 million judgment against Rudy Giuliani are asking a judge to hold the former New York City mayor in civil contempt after they said he defamed them again. The 2 election workers won the initial judgment after suing Giuliani for defamation over his baseless claims of mass fraud in the 2020 election. Now, lawyers for the 2 election workers say Giuliani has continued to defame their clients on 2 of his recent nightly shows, saying that he claimed the workers were, quote, quadruple counting ballots. The lawyers argue Giuliani violated a court order that blocks him from further claims that 2 election workers engaged in wrongdoing. They are asking that he be held in contempt and sanctioned. The judge in the case has ordered Giuliani to respond by December 2nd and has scheduled a hearing 10 days later that Giuliani is required to attend. This all comes after a months-long battle to collect the initial judgment. The workers just recently began receiving some of Giuliani's assets. A spokesperson for the former mayor called the latest effort dishonest and said Giuliani has his First Amendment right to defend himself. Congress is gone from Washington and won't return until December, and there's a long list of things lawmakers still have to get done, which includes avoiding a government shutdown. Washington correspondent Trevor Shirley has the latest from Capitol Hill.
Government funding runs out on December 20th, giving Congress just a few weeks to keep the government open.
When the Senate returns after Thanksgiving, senators can expect a very busy few weeks to finish our work before the end of the year.
The congressional to-do list includes funding the government, passing a massive farm bill that covers agriculture policy, and agreeing to the annual National Defense Authorization Act, or NDAA, to fund the military.
Presumably we'll get started on serious bills that we have to pass sometime before the end of the year. Certainly high among those would be the defense authorization bill.
Both sides will have to negotiate their own versions of all the legislation, then reconcile their differences and get the bills passed. It's a tall order for a Congress set to adjourn for the year on December 20th.
So it'll be a very busy and consequential few weeks in the Senate when we return.
Some senators say they should complete everything by the end of the year, instead of punting any work to the next Congress.
That way, the next Congress can stand at full attention, ready to advance policies to make our country safer, stronger, and a more resilient place.
But perhaps the biggest priority remains keeping the government funded. Without that, Congress can't get anything done.
Letting the government shut down just before Christmas would be asinine, plain and simple, and nobody wants that to happen.
Congress returns to Washington on December 3rd. Reporting in Washington, I'm Trevor Shirley.
And that's today's Daily Debrief. I'm Julia Manchester. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Hill's YouTube channel. And come back here soon for the intersection between politics and policy.